Most people walk into a Ferrari dealership, sign a $300,000 check, and drive out feeling like a genius. They're not. The moment those wheels hit public road, that car loses $50,000 in value. Just like that, gone. Before they've even found a good radio station. But there's a smaller group of people who think differently. They don't buy new Ferraris. They wait. They wait for that same car to get wrecked. They wait for the insurance company to panic and dump it at auction. They wait for the price to fall to $80,000, and then they buy it. That's not recklessness. That's strategy. Matt Armstrong has built an entire career on that strategy. He doesn't buy new supercars. He buys destroyed ones. Lamborghinis with shattered front ends, McLarens with torn-off doors, Ferraris that look like they lost a violent argument with a guardrail. And he turns them into profit. Consistent, repeatable, documented profit. Here's what most people fundamentally misunderstand about crashed supercars. The damage you see is almost never as bad as it looks. A crumpled hood? Cosmetic. A broken headlight? Replaceable. Shattered bodywork? Expensive, sure, but fixable. The problem isn't the damage, it's the fear the damage creates. And fear is an incredibly powerful force in any market. When most buyers see a wrecked Lamborghini, they see complexity, liability, and a money pit. They run. Matt runs toward it. And the market rewards that. Let's look at the actual math, because this is where it gets compelling. A brand new Lamborghini Huracan costs around $250,000. The day you drive it off the lot, it's worth $220,000. 2 years later, $180,000. Then someone clips a guardrail, the insurance company totals it, and it goes to a salvage auction for $65,000. That's where Matt steps in. He buys the wreck for $65,000, spends roughly $40,000 on parts and labor, and walks away with a fully rebuilt, road-legal supercar at an all-in cost of around $105,000. Market value at that point? Somewhere near $170,000. That's a $65,000 profit on a car somebody else gave up on. But here's what makes Matt's model genuinely different from a standard buy low, sell high play. He doesn't just make money when the car sells. He makes money the entire time he's fixing it. Every bolt he turns, every panel he replaces, every problem he diagnoses. That's content. YouTube content. And YouTube pays well when millions of people are watching. He's essentially turned the rebuild into 3 simultaneous income streams: the profit on the finished car, the ad revenue generated while building it, and the reputation that brings the next deal to his door. That's not a hustle. That's architecture. So why does the opportunity exist at all? Why are insurance companies selling $200,000 cars for a fraction of their value? Because insurance companies aren't in the business of fixing cars. They're in the business of closing claims. When a policyholder crashes a $200,000 McLaren, the insurer's priority isn't to maximize the vehicle's recovery value. It's to settle the claim, move the asset off their books, and get to the next case. So they auction it cheap. And that creates a gap. A consistent, structural gap between what a damaged car sells for and what it actually costs to repair. That gap is the business. Anyone with the right skills and the stomach for risk can step into it. But, and this is critical, it is a risk. Not every crashed supercar is a diamond in the rough. Some of them are traps. Electrical damage can be invisible and catastrophic. Frame damage can make a car permanently unsafe to drive. Parts for certain exotic models can be so scarce or so expensive that the repair cost obliterates any margin you thought you had. Matt has bought cars that looked straightforward in auction photos, had them delivered, opened the door, and discovered the entire wiring harness was melted. That's a $30,000 surprise on a car he'd budgeted $15,000 to fix. And there's no returning a crashed Lamborghini. Once you buy it, you own the problem. The market doesn't care about your budget. Parts cost what they cost. Labor costs what it costs. And if you run out of capital halfway through a rebuild, you're left with a half-assembled supercar worth less than the bare shell you started with. This is the edge that separates the people who profit from the people who bleed. Matt has done this long enough to distinguish cosmetic damage from structural damage at a glance. He knows which parts he can source through secondary markets and which ones require full retail price. He knows when a deal is genuinely underpriced and when it's a trap dressed up as an opportunity. That knowledge, not the tools, not the garage, not the camera, is the most valuable thing he owns. Here's something that surprises people about the rebuilt supercar market: demand holds up remarkably well. Even for cars with a salvage history. Even for cars that were genuinely destroyed and rebuilt from the ground up. Because at the end of the day, it's still a Ferrari. It's still a Lamborghini. The badge doesn't lose its power because the car was once damaged. For a large segment of buyers, owning a supercar at all is the dream, and a rebuilt exotic at 70% of the market rate is a very compelling way to live that dream. The emotional draw is real, and it keeps the demand side of this equation healthy. So the supply exists. The demand exists. The profit margin exists. The only question is whether you can execute. Let's talk about what execution actually looks like. A few years ago, Matt purchased a McLaren 720S that had been totaled in a front-to-end collision. The entire nose was destroyed, hood folded in half, headlights gone, front splitter shattered. Most people at the auction saw a write-off. Matt saw a $90,000 discount and bought it. He started tearing it down, filming everything, and 3 videos into the project, he found something that changed the entire trajectory of the build. The frame was bent. Not catastrophically, but enough that if he didn't address it properly, the car would never track straight again. It would pull, it would handle unpredictably, and it would be fundamentally unsafe at speed. A cosmetic rebuild had just become a structural one. At that point, he had real options. He could have parted the car out, recovered some of his costs, and moved on. A lot of people would have. Instead, he found a specialist, paid to have the frame properly corrected, and kept the cameras rolling the entire time. That decision to push through became 10 episodes of content. Those 10 episodes generated over 2 million views. And when the finished car finally sold, it went for $40,000 more than his original projection, partly because the audience had watched every stage of the process and trusted the quality of the work. Here's the counterintuitive lesson buried in that story: the bent frame made him more money than a clean build would have. Because people don't just want to see a car get fixed. They want to watch something nearly fall apart and then get saved. They want the drama, the setback, the moment of genuine doubt before the comeback. The struggle is the content. And the harder the struggle, the stronger the payoff. That's the formula that makes this model so durable. Every damaged car comes with a story built in. Every repair is a chapter. Every finished build is proof that something written off by the world still had value. It just needed someone willing to see it. Matt's approach to buying decisions is straightforward. He doesn't see a crashed car as a loss. He sees a car on sale. The worse it looks, the steeper the discount, and the greater the gap between what fear is telling the market it's worth and what knowledge tells him it actually costs to fix. That gap between emotion and calculation is where the profit lives. It always has been. The market has caught on, of course. Salvage auction prices for exotic cars have risen steadily over the past several years. More buyers understand the game now. The obvious deals are harder to find, and the competition at auction is real. But the opportunity hasn't disappeared, it's matured. The people winning in this space today aren't just flipping cars. They're building brands. They're creating content ecosystems around the process. They're turning a single vehicle into a platform that generates income long after the car has sold and moved to the next owner's garage. The car is the entry point. The audience is the asset. And that's the bigger picture worth sitting with, because this model isn't really about cars. It's about recognizing the gap that exists in any market where fear drives price down and knowledge drives value up. Where most people see risk, some people see a discount. Where most people see a totaled supercar, a few people see an underpriced asset with a great story attached to it. The lesson isn't go buy a wrecked Lamborghini. The lesson is simpler and more universal than that. The biggest returns rarely come from the safest bets. They come from being willing to buy what everyone else is afraid to touch, and having the skill, the patience, and the nerve to prove them wrong. That's what Matt Armstrong figured out. Not just about crashed cars. About how markets work, how fear creates opportunity, and how the thing the world has written off is often exactly where the value is hiding.